Okay, my name is Peter Svensson. I'm an Agile Development Lead at Transport for London, and I'm delighted, I should say, to speak to you about TfL's journey on Agile adoption and transformation. Now, you may not know, but TfL has practiced Agile for about 10 years. And I'm going to be touching on three of the main transformation stages that we've gone through through the years. Starting with breaking from waterfall and outsourcing into Agile and in-house. Then followed by the scaling up of Agile into large system delivery of contactless ticketing. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit how we today are adapting Agile to fit enhancements to a system in operation, and how we are tuning the Agile processes to drive innovation. I'm going to come in from this. There's so much to talk about, Agile. My angle on this is sort of a ground up. So I'm going to come in from a sort of a developer perspective, if you like, very much from a ground up. And what I've tried to do for this is try to pick out what I think are the key success factors for each of the transformations that we did sort of proactively. And the results of that. Right. So, back in 2007, 2008, TfL's Oyster team, just to set the context a little bit, were in full swing of enabling Oyster onto the national rail stations. Some of you may remember that. At that time, we were mainly focused as a team, mainly focused on putting the kit in, basically the yellow readers on the gates and all the infrastructure and all that stuff. And risk were primarily managed through project management and large upfront designs. And then we as a team did a UAT on that. Software delivery were outsourced to Cubic and went through the same path. Now, one of the key challenges for rolling out prepay onto national rail stations was the delicate question how to distribute about £1 billion of revenue between TfL and National Rail. And looking at that, I think it was clear to me anyway, that trying to specify all that up front was just never ever going to work, ever. So that was clear. Now, in-house, the Oyster data team, the way we work with revenue agreements was very much sort of in an iterative way, where we sat down together and we sort of progressively built mainly reporting sort of thing, and eventually we got the distribution sort of right. That was the natural way by which we worked. Now, going into project, the first time we sort of touched upon Agile was that, right, okay, I want to continue this way, or this natural way of working, because that is working. And that's why I looked around on the internet and I thought, right, okay, we've got something called Agile here. It's iterative, it's scenario driven, and it comes with lots of other stuff as well. So I said, right, okay, we're following a new methodology here called Agile. So we're not just winging it. So we mapped the existing way of working, which worked, to the Agile framework. The next critical step was to co-locate the developers together next to the revenue allocation team, so that when we were doing prototyping, that we have a really rapid communication and could make rapid progress on the prototyping. Now, None of this would have been put in place without an agreement with a formal agreement with the train operating companies. And the way we decided to do that was to have an iterative engagement with the train operating companies, where we sat down every month. We walked through travel scenarios, and we started with the most complex travel scenarios across London, and we just walked through how the revenue allocation would work. Once we had made sufficient progress into the actual revenue allocation mechanism, that's when we sort of stepped a bit more in-house and set up more of a proper development shop. And there was a first development shop at TfL at the time, with dev, test, and prod environment, and all the rest. And by that time, we brought on people who put up, were more used to Agile. That's when we started to put up whiteboards with post-it notes and had daily scrums and the rest of it. Now, there was, so this is a smooth description. There was a disruptive element to this transformation, I should say, because TfL was very much engineering driven and very much waterfall. So there was a lot of resistance, and it was a sort of culture, shifting culture. So the buy-in from revenue managers and also our director was absolutely critical to have as an escalation point when you sort of internally came to an end of discussions and someone had to make a decision. And having that buy-in with revenue managers and director was absolutely crucial, because otherwise it would have fallen flat. Now, that commitment from manager did come with sort of not a requirement, but we had to meet every single iteration, the expectations in every single iteration to demonstrate really that we made progress. Don't interrupt this. This is going well, and so meeting every single iteration was absolutely critical to enable this transformation. Right, so in 2010, where TfL did launch Oyster Prepay on national rail stations. And overnight, at that time, TfL became the world's largest contactless merchant. And it was it got really quite a lot of sort of quite visible to the public, and we got like awards and they got everything. So at that time, the senior management saw right. This system, revenue allocation, demonstrated that TfL had the capability to deliver really complex, cutting-edge technology in-house, and not only that, the figures that was sort of tossed around at the time was it was about 4 times quicker and 10 times cheaper than what they had got from outsourcing. So there's a huge opportunity here to sort of deliver with in-house, taking the development in-house. So that really sort of completed the transformation from waterfall to agile. We had the first whiteboard out. We had this, the first success in the bag, and job done. Right. Next phase, based on this, with this one success story and obviously a strong business case, TfL got funding from the Department for Transport to develop contactless ticketing in-house. At that point, we scaled up to 4 component teams with standard setup, 4 to 5 developers, 2 to 3 QAs, and 1 PO. That went alongside a separate build team and a separate integration and testing, integration and performance testing team. So that's all standard stuff, and the Agile was formalized, probably as most of you guys know, with standard stuff. Now, what I want to talk about here is one of the challenges that we faced. As the architecture grew, although the feature teams, the Scrum teams delivered, it became progressively harder to actually get it out to get it into production. We were hitting integration issues and all the rest of it. And it got to a point where it actually took longer to test and get it through into production than actually developing it. So at that time, we stopped, and we did a few things here. One was that previously, the technical lead had typically taken up the Scrum Master role. And what we saw was that when the pressure on delivering increased and we approached deadlines, it sort of, Agile became something, a really good idea, but not quite working out in practice. User stories were cropped up after delivery and all the rest of it. With a Scrum Master, professional Scrum Master, separate, not being a developer, we managed to maintain the Agile form and procedure even under pressure to deliver. And also, that Scrum Master managed to sort of push back the business a little bit and can actually work a little bit more proactively and seeing things, problems coming around the corner. So separating the Scrum Master role into a dedicated Scrum Master role was one step. The single most the thing that we did that probably had the biggest impact was automating the entire test suite of integration tests and also automating the deployment process across deployment environment. That enabled the integration team basically to catch up. Followed on from that meant that we lifted it, we took a subset of integration tests into the component teams and changed the definition of done so that the components team, when they delivered, there was a certain level of integration testing already done. Part of that, also, we introduced cross-team stand-up for continuous integration issues. And integration issues and build issues always took priority. The other thing initially, what we had initially was that we had sort of staggered deployment cycles. So each team had their own sort of sprint cycle. With the backlog of tests, I shouldn't say backlog, with the integration issues, when they started to sort of pile up and slow down the path into production, that meant it was quite difficult at that stage to actually have a stable solution that built. So what we did was that we coordinated the sprint cycles across team into 6 weekly cycles where the bulk of the delivery was done in the first 4 weeks, followed by 2 weeks of stabilization and integration. So I'd say that these 4 things is probably the key things that we did that sort of got us out of that. And 2014, we delivered contactless ticketing. And I'm pleased to say that we have also managed to license that to third parties who is taking it to other cities across the world. Now, I think the conclusion from this is that when scaling up, Agile, whereas in previous it was sort of a natural, just mapping on a natural way of working in the most simplistic way, scaling up to launch system delivery, Agile becomes much more a discipline in its own right. And whilst Agile is quite easy to learn, I should say, it's a hell of a lot more difficult to actually practice in reality, and knowing what Agile levers you need to pull, how to pull them and when to pull them, and actually get those right is a lot more difficult. And it requires, that's when it's required proper training to begin with, but you also need experience, and you also need a dedicated people that actively are, keep a finger on the pulse on those issues. The other thing is also the path into production and continuous integration also begins to depend on how lean you are across teams. Tooling and automation becomes very important. So there's a number of different factors here that start affecting your agility. Right. Okay. Once we delivered contactless ticketing, the focus shifted from sort of a single point of delivery of a large system into improving and enhancing a system in operation. It's fair to say that the business appetite for taking risks slumped quite dramatically, and there was a number of change controls and governance that were introduced. Now, one thing we saw, that when we started to make enhancements to the system, like minor enhancements, we were still stuck with quite complex interconnection and dependencies between teams, and we basically couldn't get like a small customer improvement out into production and to the traveling public without having to involve all teams. So it took time, and still quite a complex delivery process. That's when we started to move away from component-oriented agile delivery mechanism into more of a feature-oriented delivery mechanism. So we started to, and it's still very much in progress. It's a slow transformation of this, because we basically protecting what is working. We just want to improve it. So we are restructuring the backlog now from component features more to features that are clearly measurable for the traveling public, and the business have to prioritize that quite hard. Also, whilst before the teams were quite centered around their components, we sort of be shifting away gradually from that to have one single team delivering a single feature that hits many components. So that's a gradual transformation. We're not quite there yet, but we are trying to embed, well, we are embedding solution architects into the teams to enable the architecture to evolve. At the moment, we have an architecture review board, and it tends to be quite a lot of, the architecture that gets sort of signed off is it looks quite big to me. We're trying to get in a position where the architecture sort of more evolves through the iteration, and by embedding a solution architect into the teams enables the solution architects to still own that architecture, but it evolves more. Integration and performance issues, engineering are done right up front in the stories. So a transformation very much still in progress, quite slow this, but Apple Pay and Oyster extension onto River Services, that was delivered with elements of this model. Right. When it comes to some of our smaller niche, highly specialized domain, complex domains, we have seen that large teams large teams and set up to deliver large systems doesn't deliver sufficient innovation to crack some of our more complex domains. And the challenge here, the overriding challenge for these sort of quite small applications, is you need to cracking the domain. And cracking domain is designing something that can deal with a long tail of special cases. Often you have quite complex calculations operating on that domain. And what is required for us, at least, is to have a really high precision on this. 90% precision, or dealing with 90% of cases, is just nowhere near where we need to be. We need to be hitting 98 at very least, because otherwise it's just too much to deal with. Now, what we have seen, the key breakthroughs in here has happened in the dialogue between the right developer and the right domain expert. And just to give you an example here, your developer is sitting, designing a domain, implementing some algorithm, and at that point you have a question. Now, having your domain expert there, asking that question and get a really crisp answer to your question, and not only that, you also get a glimpse into the future, what their thinking is. That replaces so much specifications, so many emails, so many meetings, and it's so liberating, to be perfectly frank with you, and it enables to really focus on what needs to be cracked, which is that domain. Often in large Scrum teams and that sort of a large setup, this dialogue often gets diluted and happens between the wrong people, and it sometimes is even lost. And what we've seen is that does not deliver sufficient precision. So here we're going the other way around. We're stripping back Agile to really focus on this particular collaboration. So what does that mean? So basically we restructure into what we call client-side development, where we take two developers, typically, maximum 3, embed them with the business unit and co-locate with the domain experts. Product ownership and UAT rest with the domain experts. QA is automated by the developer through integration level test-driven design, in addition, obviously, to the unit testing. The governance is light touch. It's more of a, if we're talking like startup here, is more of an investor style touch rather than project management detail. Some of the practices, like daily scrums, we are replacing those with that dialogue. Progress is measured through end-to-end delivery of key scenarios in that domain. And it's typically on 1, maximum 2 weeks cycles. And UAT is, if the domain experts are happy with it, that's a delivery. That's an accepted delivery. Things like UI, for example, we don't specify that. We propose, and then we improve with feedback, because UI is just not that important. The key is to make progress on the domain. For this transformation, hosting and tooling. So hosting, Azure platform as a service, what a wonderful thing to do. You can scale left, right, and center. You have there are loads of services just on tap, and functionality like for typically we end up in a hybrid cloud solution. So patterns to move data off cloud into on premises. standard architectural templates from the architects. No reinvention on the wheel. Security, cybersecurity. Again, we just take what the cybersecurity team says, and that's it to achieve a sign-off. It's all to drive the actual development, focused development time on that particular domain. So what have we seen so far? We're very, very pleased with that. The business is pleased with this. We are. Developers are very, very pleased with this. And it's been a very significant drop from in the budgeting. So with this setup, the project cost has dropped dramatically. So and I'm quite confident at this stage that you will see results from this. So where we stand today is that we are now developing different agile practices to fit different type of projects and different type of products. So we can go outside. We've been working very much in the ticketing world, but now we become sort of a bit of a go-to department for other types of development. So we're looking at other domains across TfL, and by having a range of agile practices that we have tried, that we have tested, and that we can channel the right projects through the right agile methods. I think we're in a good position on that one. Yeah, I think that's it.